contract situations, running stuff down like this, it just brings a lot of baggage, doesn't it? For me. And
I mean, it clearly does. Like, I feel like you're trying to drive it in against Calvert.
No,
well, I don't think we need to create more of a situation than there is, because
but a situation will be created off its own. It doesn't need me to do it. It'll be created if his form's not good and he's not scoring goals. I think that's inevitable.
That's fair comments, isn't it?
That's inevitable. I'm just here
it's not
asking
the same.
questions.
It's a bit like Lescott, isn't it? In 2000, not the same. It's because Lescott was always going to go to Manchester City. But if Calvert-Lewin starts the season off the pace, misses a few chances,
that's going to be helpful. I just feel like we talked about the situation until we're blue in the face. His future is still up in the air regardless of what happens in the next couple of weeks, isn't it? There was a few moans and groans on social media with regards to Calvert-Lewin. It's like, you need to sign this contract or we need to get rid. I've openly said that in the past that I was happy for him to, run down his contract, and because I just thought he was the steady option for us for this season. But again, if you've listened to previous podcasts, you know my opinion. I've kind of changed it slightly because I'm worried that if his form wanes, then the fans will get on his back. But are Everton fans, first off, right to have a little moan and complain that he hasn't signed his contract, that he hasn't committed his future to the club?
Well, we don't really know what the conversations are going on behind closed doors, what he's been offered and things like that. I think it's understandable why at this stage in his career he might be mulling over different things, trying to work out, taking a bit of time as to what's going to happen next. I think there's probably also a little bit of trying to work out where he fits in Everton's long-term plans as well as they reconstruct their attacking unit. So, I mean, not being privy to those discussions, it's difficult. And also because, and why I say that is because, look, I think that we know Everton's financial position, both general financial and also from a PSR perspective, is a tricky one. So I can imagine that they would find it very difficult to categorically say to him that they wouldn't accept a bid for him if something came in. So I imagine you're in a situation where actually we might look at it and say Calvert-Lewin hasn't signed a new deal, therefore he's the one that's being cagey. I can kind of see how all parties are probably being cagey in this situation. It's not really helping any of them.
No.
So, it's a kind of a bit of a standoff, which we spoke about this in a previous podcast. It's a standoff that I don't think is anybody's fault. I know quite often when you get to last year of contracts for an important player, you can look at the club and say, why didn't they ward this off a year or 18 months ago? Everton couldn't really offer Dominic Calvert-Lewin a big contract last summer because of his injury issues. So, this is just something that was just unavoidable, I think. Look, there is uncertainty, but again, like I said previously, in relation to the situation on him, the dial only really moves if somebody comes in for him. Where he sits on his contract or whether Everton want to sell him or not, it's all largely irrelevant unless somebody actually wants to come in and make an offer for him. And we've just seen, West Ham are one of the sides that are interested in him. Just look like they're on the brink of signing Nicholas Fulkrug. So there's their big summer signing. All of a sudden, you start looking at, well, who else might be after him? Newcastle, we know, are interested. Callum Wilson's injured. They've got a problem there. They come to the table once. They might come back. So there's one option. I wouldn't be surprised if Manchester United had a little look at him. I mean, I'd be interested to see what the relationship between the two clubs is after the Brantford problems. But Manchester United, Højlund's just picked up an injury. They're reluctant to place too much responsibility on Xerxes hitting the ground immediately. One of the big problems that they've had on their tour of America from pre-season is just not having a natural striker that could, just stay up front and just do the obvious focal point stuff that Dominic Calvert-Lewin does. So I wouldn't be that surprised if, bearing in mind they're probably having spent so much money on Højlund and Xerxes in recent seasons, I wouldn't be surprised if they thought, well, we've seen them put a cheeky bid in for Brantford. Maybe they might put a cheeky bid in for Dominic Calvert-Lewin and just say, £15 million or something. And maybe he could just answer their problems for a little bit. I'm sure they'd give him a decent wage and he'd be happy with that. And, I imagine that Calvert-Lewin would quite like to live in London, but I think he'd probably be open to alternative suggestions if the right deal came along. So I don't really place blame on anybody in this fault. I think it's just an awkward situation that nobody is to blame for. And the uncertainty is frustrating. It's a priority for Everton to get sorted. But again, Everton can't say, yeah, you were happy to sell him if no one's willing to come in for him. But it might take something like Everton going and say, you know what, we'll lower it to 50, whatever the price tag is for him, we'll lower it, and then hopefully that'll draw some sides in. But if they're doing that, it's then difficult to be critical of Calvert-Lewin for not signing a new deal when he's got a club that's considering how it can market him. So, I think it's a complicated situation. I don't know what the answer is. I know that Everton are better when Dominic Calvert-Lewin is in that side. I don't think Everton will be able to replace Dominic Calvert-Lewin effectively. Do think they've got a little bit more backup in terms of attacking options this season. Obviously, Chimiti, when he does come back, is still a better player than he was. Betto will be growing on what he did last season. There's still obviously big question marks over him, but hopefully he can progress. And what he did do when he came in last season was two things, which are both important, even if they're not scoring goals. He allowed Everton to set up in the same way that they would play when Dominic Calvert-Lewin was there, so Calvert-Lewin's absence didn't lead to a massive change in shape, and he did cause problems for defences. How much of it was on purpose, I'm not sure, but defences didn't know how to deal with him, and I feel that if we end up in a situation where he's leading the line, with the additions of Lindstrom and the addition of Ndai, there might be players that are far more capable of exploiting the madness that's created by Betto on the pitch than we had last season. There might be more players that are capable of putting the ball into the back of the net from 20 yards if it drops there, or from playing a cute pass to one of their other attacking midfielders because Betto's created some space somewhere else. So
just sticking with you, Joe, and Gavin will come on because my next point kind of leads on to this. A contract has been offered to Dominic Calvert-Lewin. It hasn't been accepted. I assume it hasn't been rejected. I know you're not privy to these conversations, but are the club still in open dialogue? Do you know? Or
well, he's still playing for him. He's still turning up at training. So clearly
he's obviously he's contracted to do that. What I'm saying is it just Calvert-Lewin keeping his options open? Is that literally what it is?
Yeah, I think so. But then, like I say, there are plenty of reasons why that might be an astute thing for him to be doing right now. So.
But is there any? Again, I know you're not privy, but is there any way the club would go back with a different contract, different wages?
I think they probably have to assess where they are at the end of the transfer window and then see where they are. Because at the moment, going back and perhaps offering him more to see if that would tempt him, probably be a difficult thing for them to do when they're not quite sure what the best thing for them to be. There is no doubt that for all the business that's been done, and as savvy as it might have been, I think me and Gav, I don't want to speak for you, Gav, but I think we're probably in agreement that in terms of when we get to PSR for the back end of the 12 months we're now in, Everton still have a lot of work to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So and this is why I think I'm very, very reluctant for this to become a witch hunt against Dominic Calvert-Lewin for not signing a new deal. And I'm very keen for people to realise that often these things are a lot muddier than we've seen, and it might be reasonable. It might be reasonable for players to take time to consider their options. There is no doubt that an incoming transfer fee would be helpful for Everton, and for the size of what they get, even if it was a cut price deal for Calvert-Lewin, and on the terms they get with it, and for the PSR effect it would have, bearing in mind that he's been at the club for so long, it would effectively all be positive, wouldn't it, on the books? So that's why I think the standoff is probably continuing. I think we're probably at an impasse. That neither side is keen to make the first move to break. And that's probably where we are at the minute. Where I do think there might be an interesting sideshow would be is if someone was to come in for Betto. There are new reports that it's Atalanta that are interested in Betto because Scamacca's had an injury. I don't have a foothold in Italian football, so I don't know if that's true. And if I'm being perfectly honest, obviously we see a lot of rumours come out of the Italian football media, and the vast majority of them tend to go absolutely nowhere. So I'd be wary about reading too much into it. But Betto is somebody that has a profile, actually, from his time in Udinese. May have some interest in there. I would be interested to see what would happen if someone was to put a concrete offer in for Betto, who is a player who I think has potential, but I think is still raw. And if you were to offer Everton a route out where everybody saves face, and perhaps Everton bring in a transfer fee that is useful for the PSR aspect and might also help them create the freedom for them to maybe look for another striker who either plays foil to Calvert-Lewin or could replace him, then that might be a useful solution for everyone. But one thing I don't think Everton are going to do is, whilst they might be having conversations over strikers right now, as they try and work out what's going to happen if there's interest in Betto, whilst there's uncertainty over Dominic Calvert-Lewin, whilst Schmitty's injured. At the minute, they've got Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Betto, Schmitty, Neil Maupay on their books, plus Iliman and Dyer's side, who's obviously kind of attacking, and that's a permanent deal. I think it'd be very difficult for Everton to start going after strikers now without the understanding, even if it's behind closed doors understanding, that at least one of those players is going. Yeah, they don't need another striker at the moment. They can't afford to overload in that position. Like, they can't afford to overload in any position. So I think that any conversation that they'd be having over a striker now, when you see reports of them being linked to someone like Tammy Abraham or something like that, or Bouladia, like, they couldn't. If there is any truth in it, it could only be provisional on the basis that other deals happen elsewhere. Yeah. Look, I think they'd be willing to. I think if someone came in for Maupay, I think they'd be more than willing to listen. Yeah, just like they would if someone came in for Holgate. And I think they'd probably lend an ear to people coming in for Calvert-Lewin and Betto, depending on what the circumstances were. So there may well, the uncertainty around Calvert-Lewin isn't helpful, and there may well be movement late in the summer transfer window around the strikers, and that isn't ideal. But I think it's difficult to kind of reach too much for judgment on where they're at and whose fault that uncertainty is at the minute. Because, as I say, I think, unfortunately, it's a bit of a perfect storm and it's been a bit unavoidable.
Okay, final point on this, Gav, before we move over to some quick-fire questions, because we are coming up to the hour now, so we'll need to finish off in the next 5 or so minutes. Contract situations, running stuff down like this, it just brings a lot of baggage, doesn't it, for me, and
I mean, it clearly does. Like, I feel like you're trying to drive it in against Calvert.
No,
well, I don't think we need to create more of a situation than there is, because I say.
But a situation will be created off its own. It doesn't need me to do it. It'll be created if his form's not good and he's not scoring goals. I think that's inevitable.
That's fair comments, isn't it?
That's inevitable. I'm just
it's not the same. It's a bit like Lescott, isn't it? In 2000, not the same. It's because Lescott was always going to go to Manchester City, but if Calvert-Lewin starts the season off the pace, misses a few chances,
that's my point. Yeah, I think that's exactly my point.
Yeah, but at the same time, to defend Calvert-Lewin as a contractor's employee, it's well within his rights to look for options. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, that when a club announces a player's contract's not going to be renewed, but nobody bats an eyelid. That's their privilege as the employer. When an employee exercises the same options, like I'm going to look for, if my contract finishes, look for options elsewhere. Everybody gets on the back. They're two completely different scenarios. And I think we're unfair generally on players who, they've got a contract, and they're fully obliged to look at other options if they see fit or play to the end of their contract. So I've not got a problem with what Calvert-Lewin's doing. I suspect the issue, as you said several times, is what he thinks he's worth in terms of his wage and what other clubs feel he's worth, including Everton. There's probably a gap there, and the gap being that he probably wants more than other clubs are prepared to, including Everton, prepared to offer. And I get where clubs are coming from. I've said before, but I do get what you're saying. Is one of the things within this, and it's something that needs to be avoided for many different reasons. Starts of the season, Calvert-Lewin's a bit off the pace, and then you get, and we're talking about, a bit of a new start for the team, but they're pushing on a little bit and being positive about stuff. That'll be something we can do without. I think the best case scenario is really Calvert-Lewin goes and everybody's happy and we get a decent fee and we can look possibly to reinvest it and solve some PSR.
I'm going to disagree with you. I think the best case scenario is that he signs a new contract and stays for another three odd years.
But do you think so?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's fair. That's fine. I think from PSR purposes, the best thing is he goes.
But then are we going to be able to replace him?
Well, that's an issue that Joe's spoken about, isn't it? Really depends what options there are. But I think for PSR purposes, the best is that he goes. We're signing a 3-year, but then again, you say we're signing a 3-year deal. Sign a 3-year deal on what?
Money-wise.
If it's only saying, okay, be good, but what happens if it's quite a high salary that you would think, well, that's a bit of a risk. And then what happens is then you get all the other players in the squad saying, see, he's on that money, I want to be on that. And so that can have a destabilising effect. So I think Calvert-Lewin's not got a problem with 3-year contract, but it's got to be a 3-year contract that is reasonable and reflects the fact that he scored 15, 16 goals in 3 years and has been missing for half the game.
No, that's fine. I think that some people might be thinking I'm picking on Calvert-Lewin. I'm not. It's the complete,
it's the
opposite.
Context of that completely.
I am just worried from the stuff I see on social media and speaking to Blues, in the street or whatever, that there's definitely a worry that if his form drops off, he score goals. And let's face it, he has not been prolific over the past couple of seasons, that people will get frustrated. His form will dip. I mean, we saw it after Coventry. He didn't play well. There was a few moans, but I'm absolutely delighted that he scored against Preston, back on the score sheet. Hopefully he's going to be in the first team for the Brighton game. First team, he's going to be in the starting 11 for the Brighton game, and he kicks on.